Hi, my name is Deanne Barr. I am the author of such psychological thrillers as Expired Listings, Slashing Mona Lisa, and Saving Grace, a domestic suspense novel that will debut this October. It is available on Amazon for pre-order, so go over and click and purchase it. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Kathryn Jarvis. Now, Dr. Jarvis has worked in academia for a long, long time. She was with Auburn University as an administrator. She was the acting president and founding dean for a college that catered to students with learning differences. And her memoir, A Red Door, is an honest and moving story about the unraveling of a marriage and the breakup of a young family during the late 1980s AIDS crisis. Now, she reads from the book and it is absolutely riveting. So please sit back, listen, enjoy, and as always, stay safe. Welcome to another edition of Author Groupie. I'm here with Dr. Kathryn Jarvis, who retired 5 years ago from Auburn University, where she was an administrator and faculty member. She was also the acting president and founding dean of a college for students with learning differences. Her writing before what we're going to be talking about today, was all academic. She lived in Boston for a number of years and attended grad school there. It's also where she met her husband, who worked for New Kids on the Block. Kathryn has 2 grown children and lives in Savannah. Her first novel, A Red Door, which is a memoir, will be released later this year. Welcome to Author Groupie, Kathryn.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So I'm going to launch right into a bunch of questions. A Red Door is a very interesting title. What is the significance of that title?
Well, gosh. Back in 1989, February of 1989, my husband had cancer, and he had a lymphoma, and he went into the hospital in Florida, and it was a difficult surgery. They didn't get it all. It was in his neck and his thoracic cavity, and we were in a ward in the hospital. Now, this is not, this wasn't a podunk hospital. This was Shands Hospital in Gainesville, University of Florida Teaching Hospital. And we were in a ward, and on doors on the ward were red signs, and red kind of verboten signs as such on the doors on the ward. And the ward was very sterile, which hospitals can be. However, there were no balloons, there were no, hellos, no smiles, no nothing. It was just very, very sterile. And I didn't pay any attention to it. I was just freaked out that I had 2 very young children, and my husband had cancer, and the cancer was more than they could do as far as getting it all out on his neck. So that's where the title comes from. My very good friend and maid of honor in my wedding came to visit, and she said people were not welcoming. Now remember, this is 1989 February, so think about the AIDS crisis and the AIDS epidemic in this country. I'd been married for over 11 years to this man, and he had been diagnosed with cancer. So my friend came in, and I was asleep, and my husband was kind of thrashing and whatever, and he pulled the IV out of his arm, right, and blood squirted everywhere. And we both were like, oh my gosh, let's deal with this. And so we were sopping it up with towels and whatever we had, and we called the nurse. And the nurse came in a bit, and she looked like she had on hazmat clothes. Not hazmat clothes that we have now. Once again, 1989. She had on gloves and a mask and all this. And she came in, and she took one look at the scene, and she kind of just said, what do you want me to do? And I said, well, you need to reattach the IV. And she said, okay, all right. And she did, and then she retreated. And then I said, we need to get all this blood cleaned up. And she said, well, you're leaving today. And I said, well, I think, but we haven't seen the doctor. And she said, well, you're leaving today. It'll be all right. And I said, but we need to clean the blood up. And my BFF said, this is a mess. Blood's everywhere. And the woman looked at us and she said, well, it'll be all right, it's fine, and left. And we both looked at each other, and I'm, sleep deprived, and my husband's still thrashing, and he's got the IV back in, and my friend said, well, this is such a strange place. I don't understand. She said, have you noticed all those red signs on the doors? And I said, no, what red signs on the doors? She said, well, there are red signs on the doors outside. She said, it's very strange. She said, I don't even know worry about it. She said, I'll just go get towels. And I said, okay. So she went and got towels. And at that point, we had no information that my husband was HIV positive. Absolutely none.
So is the significance of the red door sort of like stay away and there are secrets that you don't know?
Yes. And the red doors, actually the doors literally on the hall had like red quarantine signs with like, skulls and crossbones and things like that. So yes, the red door is, wow, what does it mean? And so now, many, many years later, that's what it was.
Wow. And you would think that they would warn you.
They did not. There was no warning. There was no nothing. I had absolutely no idea my husband was HIV positive.
Your husband didn't know?
No, nobody knew.
Wow. So this sounds like my next question is what prompted you to write this memoir, but I think you have such a dramatic story. We know now.
Well, and what happened is once the truth was told and once it was all out, it was really therapeutic. It was really cathartic for me. And I would get the kids in bed and I would sit down and probably drink too much wine or whatever I was drinking at the time. And I sat down and I would just unload on legal pads. What had gone on the day and what was happening in my brain and all this kind of stuff. And I would just put it on pieces of paper. And the paper added up over and over. And I at some point I said, you know what, we need to put all this together. So I started putting it all together, but I put it all together in third person because it was easier for me.
Sure.
First person was very, very scary. So I made it into this kind of fictionalized account, which was all true, but I had a different name and I had different characters and whatever. And that's what I did with it. So I just kind of filed it away. And that's how I started writing it.
So you started writing it actually in the late 80s?
Yes, when that was actually going on. I literally sat at the kitchen table and just wrote at things that happened during the day, and I wrote narratives, and I was in serious therapy, and I would come back and I would actually write conversations. So I had like these notebooks filled with all this stuff. So that's what it was.
So 20 years passed between when you started writing it and when you actually went to get it published. Why the long wait?
Well, primarily because life got in the way. My husband, things happened, and this is all in the book. It was a very tumultuous time. I had no idea how my husband was HIV positive, and he declared he didn't either. And then, of course, we find out that he did know. He did have a pretty good idea, and he had not been truthful with me. And I ended up, dealing with all that and all the aftermath of that. And I had two very young children. Our children my son was not, 89. My son was 4. Was he 4? They were very young. My son was 3 and my daughter was 5.
Wow.
They were very children. So I was a single, I functioned as a single parent to a certain extent, and ended up, getting busy with life and just kind of letting it go. And I let it go and left it and said, I put it to bed, and it was I used the writings for what I needed to, which was really therapeutic catharsis. And it just took a long time to come back to it.
How do your children react to you publishing this book now?
It's very interesting. Before I did this, before I started sending it around, I have a really wonderful woman here in Savannah who's my agent. And she's the woman who really, really encouraged me to do this. And before I decided to send it out and put it out there in the world, I asked my children. And they both said, they're adults. and both of them said they were okay with it. My son, I was a little worried about my son, only because he anyhow, when you read the book, you'll find out all this true story. But my son was so young, he doesn't have a lot of memories of his dad, whereas my daughter has a lot of memories of her dad. My son said, it was a really long time ago, I didn't remember. And my daughter said, it's time, Mom. It's kind of like you're coming out. She said, it's time. It's time. It's time to tell the story. And the agent here, I sent it to her. I found out about this woman here who's just a rock star. And she was thanked in the local newspaper, the Savannah paper. And I emailed her and said, hey, I have this book and whatever. And I put it together in book form at that point. So I sent it to her, and she wrote me back, and she actually called me, and she said, it's an incredible story. She said, why are you fictionalizing it? I said, I don't know, because it's all I could do. And she said, I think if you put this into, she said, it's true. So why are you making up stuff? And I said, well, I don't know. Maybe make it sexy or sell books. I don't know, whatever. And she said, try. Can you do it? Can you put it together and make it real and just tell the truth? And I said, well, yeah, I guess. So I did. And that's what happened. And when I did that, it was a very different feeling, because I owned the story. I just owned it. And once I owned it, I was kind of like, in some ways, I suppose, a little freer, because I just owned it.
And time had passed, so I imagine that it was easier to put it in first person with like 20 years between you.
It was, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, I don't want you to go more into the book because it sounds so interesting, and I don't want you to reveal anything else. I know that I'm excited about reading it. But how did you find writing a memoir after a career of academic writing? How is it different, and how is it similar?
The discipline is similar. I can be very disciplined when I need to be, as you have to be as an academic writer. And I do a lot of, I suppose, fact checking and being really clear. The difference is that it was more fun. It was just more fun. Academic writing, I got zinged in some academic writing because, and the last thing I published, because I referred to movies, and I was trying to pull the reader in, and someone said in the review, well, you're referring to film. And I was like, yeah, Full Metal Jacket and, Argo, and some of these movies they relate to academic issues. They relate to the war, because I was writing about veterans. So I felt I was a little bit more able to be myself and have fun with it. I also really love words, and I'm a reader. I've been a reader for years, and I write. I've been writing forever, and I don't ever do anything with it. I just write stories and put things together. And so it was more fun. Academic writing was a little more disciplined, but the discipline was also good for me because I tend to be a pretty disciplined writer. So you did allude to writing stories. Do you see any fiction or other nonfiction in your future? Oh, maybe so. I have a whole series of things. Well, I do. Yes. I'm real Southern in my heart. I'm a Southern person. My grandmother was actually a native Floridian. There aren't that many of us left. Yes, I do. I have a series of stories that I'm interested in doing something with, and I'm going to finish them. They're called Funeral Food, and funerals are a big deal in the South, and there's really good food. So, yeah. Well, that's a great title. I mean, everybody's going to want to read a book with that title. So I've got some, yeah, that I'm working on, actually. That's very exciting. I'll tell you, memoirs are notoriously hard to get published because everyone thinks their story is unique. Now, yours really is. But how did you find the publisher? I mean, did your agent have a hard time selling the book because it's a memoir? I don't know. I'm not sure, Dawn. What happened is the agent put me I was on a deadline, and she said, you got to get this done by blah, 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 and I'm going to New York. and I'm taking it, and you need to send me identifying information and stuff like that. So I did, and she said, and so your job is I'm doing these people, and your job is to contact the rest of the people. I said, okay. So she did her bit, and then I kind of halfway did mine. And then I just got tired of it. And I said, oh Lord, I can't deal with it. So I don't really know. I mean, what happened is, honest to goodness, it was in October when I was down at Beacon College, which is the college that we helped start for the reunion. Mm-hmm. And it brought a lot of it back to me. I was reminded of our time in Florida as a family. And when I got back, I had sent out to Black Rose, I don't know, back when the agent told me to. And he had said, Reagan had said, send me your manuscript. And I did, and I didn't hear from him. And I thought, oh, well, whatever. And in October, I was cleaning up email and had the Beacon stuff and the Florida stuff in my brain. And I thought, you know what, I wonder what happened to that. So I wrote him, and he said, something happened. I didn't ever get it. I wonder what happened to you. So it was this real serendipity thing. And I said, oh my gosh. And he said, send it again. And I sent it again. And within probably 2 to 3 weeks, Black Rose had contacted me and said, we're interested.
Yeah, so I will say Black Rose is also my recent publisher, and they are very responsive. So yeah, if you don't hear from them right away, there's something got lost, because I find that he answers me in a day.
Yeah, he does.
Not for a query, but if I have a question about the book, I get an answer within a day.
Yeah, he's been great. And so I don't really know. I don't, once again, it was really sort of a just send it out into the universe thing for me, because I think honestly, it was really very cathartic. So it was just sort of let it be. And the story is pretty amazing, and it's all true.
What advice would you have for others who want to write a memoir then, other than telling them it would be cathartic?
Think about why you want to do it. What's the reason for doing it? I think that was a big impetus for me. Is why did I have a need other than the personal catharsis? Why did I have a need to do this? And for me, I really think back to those days in the late 80s and early 90s when AIDS was a death sentence, and it's no longer. And it was not only a death sentence, it was you hid. You couldn't tell anyone. I mean, you were like, oh my God, some people are going to find out. And people that you knew and loved were scared, and nobody knew. And in some crazy way, there's a bit of COVID in that. We don't know enough to know. So we're in a pandemic, and AIDS was not really classified, I don't think, as a pandemic. But I think that if this story can give any information about what it's like to be so afraid and to have fear drive the behavior, then good. That's a good thing. So for me, I think whatever you're writing, why are you writing it? Why are you telling your story? Not so much what's your story and how exciting it is, but why do you feel like this is important to do? And for me, it really was that in a lot of ways.
Well, I'd love to hear a few pages if you'd like to read for our viewers.
Sure, absolutely. Let me get back into this little old computer, and I will be glad to share with you. All righty. All right, here we go. I'm starting in the middle of a chapter because I don't want to do that many pages because I know people will be just like, eh. Okay, here we go. Mr. Hayes, do you have any idea why you might be HIV positive? Dr. Blake asked, her eyes fixed on me. No, Mark hesitated, his voice trembling. I don't know why I might be HIV positive. I've never had a blood transfusion. I'm not a drug addict. And we've been married for years. I shot a nasty glance at the teeny woman. This is crazy. You all have made a horrible mistake. I'm sorry, but it is the correct test, the doctor responded evenly. We rarely make mistakes like that here. Well, you've made a big one this time. It must be a false positive, I interrupted, angry now. Unfortunately, no, the test is never a false positive. A false negative, but not a false positive. The incessant hum of the fluorescent light grew louder, and the green wall started to spin. The red sign on the doors, now it made sense. I clutched the corner of the metal table, closed my eyes, and took in a deep breath. A bit steadier, my eyes opened. I asked, there must be another test. I mean, how accurate is this thing? It's fairly accurate. There is another test, the Western blot, that will run, of course, just to be absolutely certain, but I don't think it'll show a different result. The bile clotted in my throat. I shook my head, trying to dislodge the information I'd just been given. Mark sat silently, staring up at the flickering overhead light. Well, what does this mean? Does this mean he has AIDS? My eyes darted frantically to each doctor. We believe that the cancer is a result of the HIV infection. Does my husband have AIDS? My voice now high-pitched and frantic. No, not at this point. But he'll get AIDS. That's what HIV means. I was having trouble breathing. My throat was clogged, my eyes burning. Gazing down at Mark, my voice came from somewhere far away, like I was watching a movie scene unfold, and I belatedly finally figured out the plot. Does this mean I am HIV positive too? The doctor stood silent. My eyes darted frantically around the room. Dr. Blake finally spoke. It's likely. Mark grabbed at his bandaged neck and turned his head to face her. His voice cracked, panicked. What about our children? How old are they? 5 and 3, he stammered. We don't know a lot about the disease in children, but the older they are, the less likely they're infected. What do you mean? I croaked out. Well, the chances are the 5-year-old is fine, but the younger one may not be. Oh, dear God. A locomotive barreled through my head. Blood throbbed in my ears so loudly that I clutched my hands around my neck to quiet the racing pulse. I lunged for the door, staggered out of the room into the desolate hall, crashed against the cold, pocked wall, and hunched over, strands of hair falling in my face, sticking to my lips. Crouching forward, I threw up. Mrs. Hayes, from somewhere overhead, I heard my name as a white blur floated fuzzily in front of me, and my eyes attempted to focus. I slumped down against the wall in the corridor outside the examining room. Loose hair streaked with vomit dangled around my face, and fetid dribbles continued down the front of my shirt. I crawled out of my safe, dark place and wrinkled my nose at the foul odor, then realized the smell was coming from me. Dr. Rosen reached out her hand, and wearily I got up. The doctor guided me into the bathroom. You'll probably want to wash up, she offered, and turned on the faucet, staring into my vacant image in the mirror. I'm going to get you some water to rinse out your mouth. I'll be back in a minute. Alone, I peered in the smudged mirror over the sink and hung there, listless, the sound of the water rushing out of the tap, like the whooshing in the plague dream when my hole came loose. Now I'd slipped into the icy grave. This can't be happening. In a minute, I'll wake up. The bathroom door opened, and the doctor returned with a paper cup filled with water. Rinse your mouth out and then swallow this. She opened her hand to give me a small white pill. What is it? It's a mild sedative, Xanax. It'll help. Thank you, but I don't want it. I turned back to the sink and splashed water on my face. Just leave the cup of water, please. My back to the doctor, I pulled a paper towel from the dispenser and dampened it, swiping the stiffening rings of hair and dabbing at the spots on my shirt. Dr. Rosen waited, not making eye contact, glancing at the wall over my head. I'll give you a few of the Xanax to keep just in case. They might help. She hesitated, her brown eyes moving to me. Is there anything I can do for you? I regarded the concerned woman's reflection in the mirror. Wordlessly, I shook my head. Well, then I'll leave you. Your husband is outside. I'll see you in the morning to discuss the treatment. Without turning around, I responded to the woman in the mirror. There is no treatment for this. I pushed away from the sink, brushed past the doctor, and shoved open the door.
Wow. Wow, that was amazing. And what was really interesting about that is that it had as much suspense as any fiction novel.
Oh, well, good, because it's all true.
Yeah, absolutely. You could be writing fiction. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I want to thank you so much. I know the book, do you know when it's due out? Because on Amazon, it didn't have a release date.
I think it's September 2nd, something like that. And
Okay.
It's in pre-orders. It's in pre-order status. I haven't seen the book yet. I haven't gotten my copies yet. But I think it's September 2nd, something like that.
It's a good day. It's my wedding anniversary. So
Oh, good. Well, happy anniversary and happy book.
Thank you. I'll be absolutely pre-ordering that. I want to thank you so much for joining me. I want everybody to pre-order A Red Door.
A Red Door.
A Red Door. It's put out by Black Rose Writing, and it's available on Amazon. Kathryn, it's been lovely meeting you, and I wish you well, and please stay safe.
Thank you. It's nice meeting you. Thank you for this. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.